All right, so today's topic is, well, anyway, yeah, I forgot to put POTA and QRP in there. So as you could probably tell, I'm mostly a SOTA guy. SOTA is Summits on the Air. I have done some POTA Parks on the Air activations. They're fun too. For me, I'm more of a, I just like the idea of climbing a mountain and setting up a radio and having fun up there. But it's virtually the same process for POTA. And there's a bunch of other OTAs out there too. Like ARRL's got volunteers on the air going, VOTA. That's been doubled actually. And there's some folks out on the West Coast that do volcanoes on the air, where they like go to the top of Mount St. Helens and things. Yeah, there's just okay. There's Walmart on the air. There's Walmart's on the air. Yeah, there's just it's really grown. It's pretty crazy. But anyway, I love these pictures. So up here on the left, this is kind of a typical guy. He's got some kind of a vertical looks like setup, and he's up there, talking away. You can actually buy all kinds of SOTA swag. This is my flag. I always attach it to my mast, makes for good pictures and things. Now these guys, like I know this guy out on the West Coast, his name is Tim, and you'll see him featured on the QRZ page a lot because he does all kinds of videos and things. And he does things like climbing Mount Hood in the winter. That's a technical climb, and he'll go up there and do activations. That is not me. I'll tell you that right now. But there are people that love doing that. They set up tents and the whole 9 yards. There's me. That was my favorite activation. That was in Ireland. And this was exactly a year ago. I was in Ireland on business, and I'd been there like 6 times. So I decided that rather than going and drinking, I would find the highest peak in Eastern Ireland, and it's not really even a climb, it's a hike, and set up and do an activation. And it was a blast. I took my 705 with me and just set up a wire antenna. And I was talking to stations all over Europe. It was so cool, including some summit to summit, which I'll talk about in a little bit what that is. So yeah, it was really, really fun. And as you can see the guy wires. There was actually a great big TV broadcast antenna at the same site, which was a little challenging, but anyway. Actually, I think that's my buddy Tim there I was just mentioning. Yeah, he likes to climb up to the top mountains, especially in the winter. And then this guy, I don't know who this guy is, but I don't know how he got up there, first of all. And how he's standing upright with that huge mast. But that guy's pretty serious, quite obviously. Okay, moving right along. Yes, sir. Yeah, the question was the guy up on Mount Hood in the middle of winter, is he 16 years old? He's not 16, but he's probably 24, 25. Yeah. Yeah. He works for Columbia Sportswear. He's hardcore. Yeah. Yeah. Not that anybody in this room couldn't do that if they didn't want to, but yeah, he's anyway. All right. There we go. All right, so I'm going to start with SOTA, then I'll get into POTA. Again, as I mentioned, there's a lot of similarities, but they are a little bit different as well. So as far as the background, it started in about 2010. I don't know if I have the year in here. SOTA started in 2010 out in Europe, England to be exact. And they just came up with this idea. Some of these guys have been doing this for years, but there was no formal program around it. We're like, hey, let's go to the top of the mountain, set up a radio. Well, the earliest one that we know of was this one on the right here, W7ZOI on Mount Evans, which I'm not sure where that is actually, 1967. Now, can you imagine, just for a moment, what it would take in 1967 to haul an HF rig up to the top of a mountain and communicate? We're talking tubes and lead acid batteries and God knows what, right? So that was hardcore. I mean, nobody's ever going to be that hardcore, I don't think. So yeah, that was crazy. And in the winter, no less. The only one I know that comes close is anybody know Steve WG08T? Yeah, he's crazy. He's got goats, and he'll use goats to haul his rigs and whatnot. But anyway, all right. So that's how it got started. Around 2010, a bunch of folks in the UK said, "Hey, we should put this together and make a program out of it." And so they did. They called it Summits on the Air, and to this day, that's the website. It's like sota.co.uk, I think is the website. And they started assembling a database of mountains that you could climb. And they came up with a system for scoring the mountains in terms of difficulty and things like that. So it's basically 1 to 10 point scale. 10 obviously is the toughest. The funny thing, though, is it varies by region. So the way that they scale and score these mountains depends on the area that you're in. So, for example, in Colorado, as you might guess, 10-pointers are 14ers or very technical, difficult hikes, things like that, like Long's Peak, for example, or whatever. Right. And then a 1-pointer in Colorado is like Green Mountain, wherever it is, right over here. Right. It's an easy hike. You can do it in your sleep. Outside of rattlesnakes, there's really not any danger. And anyway, so the funny thing is, though, is in Ireland, when I was there, I hiked Kipure Mountain, which is the tallest peak in Eastern Ireland. Well, if you've ever been to Ireland, it's not exactly a mountainous island, right? And so that was the equivalent of a Green Mountain hike, but it was a 10-pointer. So if you want to accumulate a lot of points, go to a country that doesn't have a lot of mountains, and you can accumulate a lot of points. Plus it was in March, so I got an extra 3 points because it was a winter activation. So I really raked it in that time. Okay, so in terms of some of the terms, so an activator, and this is true for POTA as well, an activator is just somebody who actually goes up to the top of the mountain, or goes to a park, or goes to a Walmart, or wherever they are, and they put up a radio. So they're the ones that are doing the actual heavy lifting, if you will. Chasers are the other end of the conversation. So if you're sitting in your ham shack and you go to 152 or 152.46, whatever the national calling frequency is for FM, you'll hear people up on mountains calling out CQ SOTA, or in parks CQ POTA. And so you can respond to those guys, and it's just real simple. You just give them a signal report and make sure they got your call sign right, and that's all you got to do. And then they will log that as an activation, and they get points for it. Now, if you're interested in actually also getting points, but you're not somebody who's going to hike up to the top of a mountain, or you're not interested in hanging out in a park with a radio, you can also get points for being chasers, which means that you would have to log that QSO as well. And I'll get into logging a little bit later, but that's the way it works. And so you get a number of points. And when you exceed a certain number of points, then you get awards. So for SOTA, I'll talk about that in a little bit too. You get a thing, you can become a mountain goat. And if you're a chaser for SOTA, you become a shack sloth, which I don't really like that term very much. Doesn't do much for the hobby's reputation, I don't think. But anyway, and then on the POTA side, there's different like diamond, sapphire, and so on levels. So, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. Okay, and then logging, I'll get into a little bit later as well. It's very, very straightforward. Down here on the right, that was one of the early portable kits. They called it the Micro Mountaineer. It was a 1/2 watt QRP kit, featured in QST magazine in 1973. And yeah, I'm going to guess that was just probably all CW going on there with a 1/2 watt. But anyway, okay, so the main topics I'm going to cover: operating modes and challenges, activating and chasing. I'm going to show you my SOTA kit, which is right here. And Mark's got his SOTA kit already splayed out on the table, so he can. Oh, your POTA kit. I thought you did SOTA too. Okay. Well, okay, cool. Awesome. Yeah, that's at the end, especially because we're going to. Yeah, it's going to be show and tell at the end too. So good. Yeah, and then I'll have some resources that you can get to if you're interested. I didn't create this, but I think it's hilarious. So, the SOTA activator. So what my friends think I do, I think I'm sitting out on a mountain with a walkie-talkie and I'm just talking to other people. Hikers, probably because I'm carrying, a lot of times I'm carrying a rod and stuff. They probably think I'm a fisher person. Chasers think I'm laying there in the, out on the sunny field and just talking on the radio, which is sometimes true. Other hams that don't do it probably think this is what I'm doing. And I do not do that. Some people do, but I do not. But you could if you wanted to. What I think I do, well, that's pretty close. Although I don't do a lot of CW in the field because I'm not that good, at picking out call signs. What's that? Oh, that's WGoat. Yeah, that makes sense. That looks like one of his little tin can setups that he would. Oh, yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. Now I have to keep everybody awake so you don't fall asleep because it's dark. But anyway, get more coffee if you need it. Yeah. And what I really do is kind of similar, right? Just kind of hanging out with, a radio and antenna and going from there. Okay, different operating modes. And you got Herman Miller. That's one of my favorite pictures up there. You know, I kind of don't think he's doing SOTA there, though. Maybe he's chasing. But anyway, so virtually any mode will work. FM is very popular. So let me talk a little bit about, you know, kind of the mechanics of an activation, at least the way I found it. Typically, when I'm doing SOTA, you know, it's strenuous exercise to get up there. Sometimes not as much, sometimes really strenuous. Then you get to the top, and if the weather's great and you got all day and you don't think there's going to be a thunderstorm blowing in 10 minutes, then you can take your time and set up all your equipment and have lunch. I know one guy who even makes coffee every time he goes on an activation. He actually brews his own coffee at the top. Yeah, whatever, you know, whatever. But and a lot of times you get to the top and the weather's not great. It's windy. There's thunderstorms coming. There's God knows what's going on, right? It might be muddy and, you know, who knows what. So the least common denominator to get your required 4 QSOs is FM, right? You can do it with a simple radio. Got mine in here somewhere. I'll do it during show and tell. But anyway, any FM. Yep. Yeah. So the question was there is a requirement as far as the minimum number of feet away from your vehicle or whatever in order for it to qualify. So for example, you can't drive all the way up to the top of Mount Evans and operate from the parking lot and do SOTA. You could do POTA that way. I'll talk more about that. You could, because it's in a national forest, but SOTA, you have to be within an activation zone, and the activation zone is, I forget, was it 50 meters, something like that. It's a distance from the highest point. And there's actually apps that will tell you when you're within the activation zone, and the activation zone, I guarantee, is not going to be in a parking lot. Right. So yeah, but great point. Yeah, it's a contour level. Yep, exactly. Right, there you go. Yeah, so long as you're within the activation zone, then it's fine. But yeah, typically that's going to be, you know, a hike away from a parking lot. Plus, if you've gone all the way up there to the top of Mount Evans, don't you want to go to the top? It's a 10-minute walk. Why not just go up there, right? But anyway, but yeah, FM is the quickest way. All you need is a little handy talkie, you know, with, if you're close enough to the front range, you can even do it with a rubber ducky, because there's a lot of people, high-powered receivers and good antennas on the other end. And you know, so if all you want to do is just get up, activate, get your 4 QSOs and get off, that's the quickest way, right? And requires only a technician license and doesn't require any special equipment other than a handy talk. So that's a good way to go. Now, if you want to get a little bit fancier, then you can go with a directional antenna, or of course, one of those extended antennas. Some people even do like what they call a rat's tail, you know, on there to give you a little bit better SWR. And that does help a lot. I built a homemade Moxon, which is backpackable. It's just made out of aluminum tubing, weighs nothing, cost me about $15 to build in, you know, an afternoon. And that thing gives you as much gain as a Yagi. You know, it's about 6 dB of gain, and it works awesome. And I actually I was on the top of, I want to say, I can't remember, it was either Evans or Mesta Hay, one of those, with that Moxon. And I talked to a guy on the top of Pikes Peak, 90 miles away on 5 watts. It's pretty cool. Unfortunately, repeater-based QSOs don't count. You can use the repeaters to announce that you're on the mountain and you're looking for chasers, but you can't do a QSO over repeater because that's cheating. Interestingly, though, satellites are okay. I'm not sure I would want to try that because those satellite QSOs are so fast, but some people do it. You know, and then basically, you know, any mode, any band that you want to use is cool, other than repeaters. So sideband / phone. That's also relatively quick and easy. That's a little more involved. Of course, you have to have at least a general license or above. Well, actually, you could do 10 meters with a technician license, which could easily be done, especially now that we're going into the Solar Max. But in any event, it does require, you know, a better radio, typically a more expensive radio, and then antennas become, you know, dealer's choice. There's 1,000 different antenna configurations you can go with, and I'll get into that a little bit later too. It is nice though, because you can get some serious DX that way. Obviously with a 5-watt handheld, you're going to get maybe 20, 30 miles typically, unless you've got a better antenna. Whereas with with HF, you could go around the world. I've talked to France from the top of where was I? I think it was Nestahe. I talked to a guy in France on phone with a 5.9 signal report, 10 watts. So it's really funny. If you're a geek, that's really rewarding, right? Be able to say, yes, I did that. I talked to somebody on the other side of the world from the top of a mountain. And what's fun too, we'll get talking about summit to summit as well. It's even more exciting when you talk to another ham on another peak somewhere, especially if they're on a different continent. That is super cool. Okay, CW, the original digital mode, is great for long distance. Two of the guys that I hike with regularly, K0ES and Walt W0CP, these guys are amazing. They're both in their 80s. They're in way better shape than I am because they hike these things all the time, and they both only do CW. And in the time it takes me to get, say, 10 QSOs on phone, they'll get 20 or 30, and they're working the world on 5 watts. It's just incredible what you can do with CW. So as a result, and if you look at the out on the SOTA site, they actually have QSOs ranked by mode, by frequency, all these things, and CW is number 1 by a mile. So a lot of people do that, obviously. And they say that 5 watts of CW is the equivalent of about 100 watts on phone. So, it's very, very efficient. One thing I have found is that don't forget headphones though, because it's really hard to be able to hear those call signs and things, especially if the wind's howling or other people are activating and so on. And a portable key obviously is pretty helpful. Now, digital, I have yet to do a digital activation. I have all the equipment to do it. And as I'll show you in a minute when I do my little show and tell, I have an IC705, which has Wi-Fi in it. So you don't even have to have a wire connected to it. You can just do it wireless from your laptop to the 705 over Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. But I don't want to carry the extra weight a lot of times. So I do have a much lighter laptop now, so maybe I'll do one this summer. But anyway, yeah, so you need to have like a PC, or actually, Mark was just showing me he's got a QDX. Yeah, this is a little FT8 box. So that's pretty interesting. So yeah, anyway, I'll let you talk about that when we get to the show and tell. Yeah, so digital is fine. Some people do RTTY RTTY as well, but it does add weight and complexity. You better have time to get everything set up and tested and all that stuff. So, again, it just depends. But if you are in a high wind situation when you can't hear anything, and like we did activation up on, wasn't Evans, it was right by the Rogers Peak a couple of years ago, and the wind was blowing 40, 50 miles an hour. You couldn't hear anything, even with headphones on. But with a digital mode, it doesn't matter. The radio could hear just fine. So that's really good for those situations. Plus, you don't have to have a great antenna because those weak signal modes, I swear to God, they'll work on a spaghetti noodle sometimes. All right, moving right along. There we go. All right, so just the nuts and bolts of a SOTA activation. First of all, find a summit. So you go to the Summits on the Air website. Again, I think it's sota.co.uk, or you can just Google SOTA and it'll come up. There are an incredible amount of SOTA targets in this state. We have 14 regions in Colorado, 1,811 summits. And when I first put this deck together, which was about a year ago, it was in the 1,700s. So they're still adding more and more and more peaks. So we don't lack for any number of targets to go for. And they're all ranked by points. A lot of times people that have activated the peaks have put in very copious notes. We've got a few hams in the area that just do an awesome job. They take pictures, they give you GPS coordinates for like parking lots, all kinds of great information out there just to make it easier for other people. So find your SOTA. When you're getting ready to go, then you do a notification. There is a website called SOTA Watch. Oh yeah, and there's the URL for the summit, summits.sota.org.uk. SOTAwatch.sota.org is the place where you notify chasers that you're going to be activating. So you put in which peak you're planning on doing, or peaks. Some people do multiples in a day. You put in what mode you're going to operate, approximate frequency. That, obviously that doesn't always pan out, because if somebody's on the frequency when you're doing it, then you've got to QSY somewhere else. But you can at least tell people that you're going to be in the area and the approximate time that you're planning on being there, so they know to watch for you. All right, then getting there, of course, read all those tips. It's really handy to have a GPS of some sort. There's a great GPS app for the phones called Gaia, Gaia, that I use a lot. It's wonderful. You can download topo maps. You can put in, not only roads, but topo. There's 4 or 5 different maps that you can load into it. And then you can mark your points and things, and it will track. You can tell it to record, and it will actually track where you went, which is great, because if you're coming back down and the weather turns and you get sidetracked somehow, you can look at the map and see where you're supposed to be, and that can save your life potentially. So that's a great thing to have. I'll show you in a minute too. When I do mine, I have a Garmin InReach, which is a satellite device, which is great for, I call it my I've fallen down a mountain and I can't get up device. And that's really, really nice to have, just as insurance. So I'll talk about that. And that app, the #1 app that I like is called SOTA, and it's available on the app stores. And that one has not only the entire database in there, but it also has the ability to tell you how far you are from the activation zone. So, because again, remember, you have to be inside the activation zone for it to count, right? So it'll actually point to where you need to be, and it will tell you in feet or meters or whatever, how far away you are from the activation zone. Because a lot of times what you'll find is, if you go to the very top of the peak, some of those peaks have very limited real estate at the top, and plus they're windy as hell, right? So if you can just come off the peak, a little bit, still be in the activation zone, you can not freeze to death, and also have a much more pleasant experience while still being in the activation zone. So that's a great app for that. And that's free, by the way. And then actually running the QSOs, as I mentioned. So you get to the activation zone, you set up your equipment, and then off you go. You can spot yourself when you get up to the top, and you know what frequency you're going to work and all of that. You can go various places. If you have internet access, you can just go to the same site that you did to do the watch, and you can say, hey, everybody, this is where I'm at. And you will be amazed the pileups that start once you do that. Yeah, Mark. Yeah, so the question was how far off the top of the peak you can be and still be in the activation zone. What were you were saying? Contour lines, yeah. 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 So 2 contour lines was the answer. Well, if it's 50 feet, I would guess they're 20-foot lines. I don't know. 20. Yeah. Well, that's why having the app is nice. Because the app will just worry about it for you. But yeah, I think a general rule, 50 feet, from the very apex is a good rule of thumb. I mean, all of these programs are on the honor system. You could literally be sitting in the parking lot of the Walmart over here on Wadsworth and say you're on top of Mount Evans. All right. Nobody's going to know except for yourself, and yeah, you're going to lose serious hand points for doing that. But yeah. What's that? Yeah, exactly. Okay. So once you're in the activation zone, self-spot if you can. There's an alternate way to self-spot, by the way. If you don't have internet access, sometimes phones will still have text access, SMS. And there is a way that you can self-spot through SMS as well. So, and then you can also, if you're running CW, the reverse beacon network, if you've spotted yourself or put a watch up, when it sees your signals, it'll automatically spot for you too, which is really cool. Okay, and then for SOTA, as I mentioned, you only need to have 4 QSOs. I generally try to go for at least 6 because sometimes you don't copy somebody's call sign down right or whatever, and it doesn't qualify. So it's always good to have, a margin of error there. But, if you're in the middle of a blizzard with, 60-mile-an-hour winds, maybe 4 is good enough. Okay. How do we log it? I'll get to that in 1 second here. All right. So, yes, sir. Oh yeah. Question was, is 4 the norm, or do other people go up? 4 is the absolute minimum. Yeah, I've only done maybe 1 or 2 when I had like 4 or 5, and again that was in adverse conditions. Some people go up there and do 70. If the weather's nice and especially if they're running CW, you can do a CW QSO, in 30 seconds. And if you got a pilot going, man, you can just crank, and these guys, yeah, it's amazing how many of these guys can do. Yeah. Yeah, good point. Yeah, and I'll talk about that in a minute too. You can do dual activation. So, for example, you can be on top of Mount Evans, which is also in the Arapahoe National Forest, I believe, and so you can do 10 or 12 SOTA, and then you can do 10 or 12 POTA, and you can do both. So why not? So okay, yeah, this is just to give you an idea of how many peaks we have. This is off of the SOTA map site, and you can see every one of these little squares here, rectangles, are peaks. And this is just kind of Park County and a little bit of Summit County. So as I mentioned earlier, we have 1,811 SOTA peaks here, not even one in Florida. So sorry, John, you're not going to be doing any SOTA activations today.
I'm going to be doing BOTA, boats on the air and beaches on the air, BOTA.
There you go. There's beaches on the air too. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, you could definitely do those. You have lots of those. Bring your sunscreen. Anyway, but yeah, I looked up just because I was curious what the highest point was in Florida, and it's Britton Hill at 345 feet, which just doesn't have enough prominence to be a peak. I don't know why, it just doesn't. But what's really funny too is it's the park where this peak so speak is Lakewood Park, and it's just off of Highway 285 in Florida. Isn't that funny? Anyway, but nope, does not qualify. Although it's a park, it might qualify for POTA. I don't know. Anyway, there are a few in Georgia though, so if you live in Florida, you don't have to go too far. All right, so talk about logging and awards. So the awards they give out are pretty cool. If you look up here on the right, so as I mentioned, one of my SOTA buddies is Walt Stinson, W0CP, and he's got, I think, a couple now. So, and I'll talk about how you get these in a second, but basically they're pretty nice. So the way that they score these summits is a function of height, difficulty, and the prominence. And what they mean by prominence is if you've got, say you've got like 3 14ers right in a row, as an example, Grays and Tories, right? They're both 14ers. Only one of the two counts because they're too close together. So the prominence is just how prominent they are compared to the other peaks that are in the area. So that's why just not every peak is just automatically a SOTA peak. And they range from 1 to 10 points. And as I mentioned, you get an extra 3 points for activating in the winter. Interestingly, down south, like in Arizona and New Mexico, they also get extra points for activating in the summer because it's so blankety blank hot down there that it's much harder. Anyway, not so much in Colorado, though. So as I said, the activators issue alert on SOTA Watch, and then just to tell everybody that where they're going to be and what frequency they're going to be on. Logging is the responsibility of the activator. And so what I do, I actually have just a little paper pad. I found this awesome waterproof paper, and it's best with pencils, right? And so that way you can be in the middle of a rainstorm, you don't have to worry about destroying your log or anything like that. Some people do electronic logging, like on a phone or whatever, but I find that just a little too cumbersome to worry about. So anyway, but yeah, all your logging there. Here's my activation log here. So my very first peak. So I haven't been doing this that long either. Coming up on 2 years. Was in 2021. We did Mount Herman down there. That's where Steve WG0AT lives. Literally, he practically lives on top of that mountain. But anyway, it shows how many QSOs I had, how many points the peak was, and so on. And then you can click and show your logs and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, so when you do your logging, you just literally write down the time, frequency, mode, call sign, and then optionally the signal report, but that's not required for logging. And then when you get back, you go to the website, the SOTA, POTA, whatever website, and you click log. And there's a couple ways to do it. On SOTA, you can either do it through a web interface where you're just typing them in, which, you know, if you've got 10 or something, that's no big deal. But if you have more or you've got multiples you want to do, you can also put it all into an Excel spreadsheet, and they give you the format on the website. So you just download the spreadsheet, fill the spreadsheet out, which is nice because you can do copy and paste, and that makes it a lot quicker. And then you can just upload the spreadsheet up and get processed that way. Yeah, yeah. So if you want to do electronic logging, you can also do like an ADIF file or whatever. What's the other format? Anyway, Cabrillo. Yeah, I'm not sure which exactly ones they support. Yes, sir. Oh yeah, good point. Yeah, you just pointed out. I forgot. You also have to tell them what peak you were on. Yeah, yeah. Then each peak has its own designator, like you see here on my log here. Like Mount Herman is W0C/FR-063. So W0C is the region, as you might guess from the zero. That's Colorado. So 0C is Colorado. FR is front range. So there's like 7 different zones within Colorado. There's front range, park range, so on. And then the peak number 063. So yeah, you definitely need to log that. And if you're talking to the person who you're talking to on the other end, the chaser is also participating, they're going to need that peak number so that they can get credit as well. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. So if you're a chaser, then the chasers also have to submit a log. And that's actually really nice because sometimes if you get somebody's call sign, you write it down and it gets smeared or, you know, whatever, you couldn't hear it right. If the chaser also logged it, you can go into the SOTA database and you can say, there's an area where you can say, show who chased me. And it will show all the call signs of people that logged QSOs with you. And that sometimes you can figure out who they were and fix your log, which is really helpful. Okay, so no confirmations are required. Unlike contesting or whatever, it's just a 100% honor system. So anyway, yep. And so as far as scoring on SOTA, when you get to 1,000 points, then you get to be a mountain goat. And as you can see, I've got 78 points, so I've got a little ways to go. I'm more like a SOTA snail right now, but we have people in Colorado that have mountain goats many times over. I think the record's maybe 7 or something. It's unbelievable. Some of these guys will go out 5 or 6 days a week and they'll activate 3 peaks at a time. And I mean, some people, it's just their life. It's crazy. Anyway, so I'm not retired, so I can't do that, but some of you could if you wanted to. Yeah, okay, moving right along. For some reason, there we go. All right, so chasers, as I mentioned, they can also earn points and award. They can become a shack sloth, and which is the equivalent of a mountain goat. Now, let me talk about summit to summit. So when you talk to someone else who's participating in SOTA and they're also on top of a summit, they call it summit to summit or S2S. And a summit to summit is cool because you get credit not only as an activator, but also as a chaser. So both of you get double credit, which is pretty cool. Plus, it's just awesome, you know, to talk to somebody else that's also on the top of a mountain somewhere with limited antennas and equipment and so on. Here's an example of sometimes they have summit to summit parties. Like every year we have a 14er event here in Colorado, which is not just a SOTA event, but obviously a lot of SOTA people participate. And so, you know, you'll be able to, that's a prime time to go, except for a lot of times if you go to a popular peak, you know, it's like, you know, up on Lookout Mountain, there's like 16,000 antennas up there. And, you know, it gets kind of difficult to operate when you have that many people. But anyway, here's a graph that kind of showed one of the summit to summit parties that went on. Okay, moving right along. All right, I talked about multiple activations already, so you can do SOTA, POTA, BOTA, whatever. If there's an overlap, you can do multiple activations. I talked to one guy. I chased a guy out in Nevada who was doing a triple park activation. He was in 3 parks that somehow intersected, overlapped, and he was right in that one point where he could activate 3 parks at the same time. So that's pretty interesting. So for example, you could do SOTA on Independence Mountain, which is in the Arapahoe National Forest, and you could do both. Now you can't do both QSOs at the same time. You sort of have to do one and then do the other. But if the weather's nice, no big deal. All right, let's talk about rigs a little bit, and we'll get into actual rigs in a little bit here. So I see the ICOM IC705. That's the one I use currently. A great little rig. It's a bit on the spendy side. Most of these are, of course, but really, really capable. The Elecraft KX2 and the KX3 are, when you get the hardcore guys, especially ones that are doing CW, that's what almost every one of them has. They kind of have a little bit of an elitist, like Mark Ehr. You can tell he's cool because he's got a KX3. But yeah, you didn't wear your hat though today. But no, those are just incredible rigs, and they are tough, and yeah, they're just wonderful. I started with the Xiegu G90, which is about a $400 to $500 rig. That's a great starter rig for anybody that wants to get into HF. Even though it's a Chinese radio, it's actually very capable. It's a full SDR underneath. Weighs about 4 pounds, so it's not the lightest out there, but it's still backpackable. It's very efficient as far as power, and even has a waterfall display there, just like the 705 does, just only a lot smaller. An older rig, but also used by legions of people even today, are the Yaesu FT817 and 818 rigs. They are getting a little long on the tooth, and they're a bit on the heavy side, but they do have built-in batteries. Good point. Yeah, the Xiegu also has a tuner in it. The Xiegu, however you say it, is heavier than the 705. Although when you look at mine took a tumble last summer when I was up on Mestahe, and I realized at that point that I didn't want my $1,000 plus rig falling off of a rock, so I put a cage around it, POV cage, which is aluminum, that added probably another pound to it. So it's, when you put a cage on the 7.5, it's probably comparable, maybe a little heavier, but it's like 3 pounds versus 4 pounds, somewhere in there. But very capable, and it's also quite a bit larger. It's probably twice the size of the 705 because it's fairly long. But it does have an auto tuner in it, whereas the 705 does not. I get around that just by using a resonant antenna. I do have a little tuner for it, but I don't find that I need it very often. I don't think the 818 has a tuner in it either. The KX2 and KX3, I believe it's an option that you can get it internally. So that's another big plus for those, because they're teeny tiny. Like the KX2, I think is 13 ounces. It's incredible. Most of these you will wind up running with an external battery. You don't have to, like the 705, the 818. I think the KXs2 have a battery, don't they, that you can get with them? But the problem is, like with the 705, if you're running the internal battery, you're limited to 5 watts. If you're running an external battery, you can do 10. So that's kind of a big difference. Anyway, and then as far as HTs, a good starter rig, the one I started out with was the Yaesu FT70D. Now I take that back. That was my second one. My first one was the one down below, the Baofeng UV82 HP. A lot of people wrinkle their noses at Baofengs, but this, just as a plain FM non-digital rig, that thing is incredible. It's 8 watts. It has very good selectivity. It's not great, but it does the trick. And it's like, I just saw 2 of them on Amazon for $60. So if you're a new ham and you just want to get in, that's a good way to do it. Yes, sir. Yeah. So the question was, is the UV82 any better than the UV5R? I don't know. I've never had both of those. I did have the Baofeng DMR 1702, I think it was. And that was a horrible radio. Just yeah, I hooked that up to my J pole. Yeah, it works great. Yeah. Speaking of antennas, I'll get to that in a minute here. But anyway, so the point is, you can get into it for $30 and have all the equipment you need to do a SOTA activation. So, or you can spend multiple thousands if you want to, which is kind of what happens, right? They multiply over time. I'll show you my SOTA kit in a bit here, but here's a picture of it. So, I just have this pack. This pack that I have here is actually a camera bag. When I first bought my 705, down at HRO, they were showing me the nifty Icon backpack. And what is it, $150, Rob? Something like that. It's crazy for a backpack. So I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. That's too expensive. So I started looking around on Amazon and I found this thing. This is a camera bag configured almost exactly like the Icon, probably the same factory in China making them, I'm going to guess. And it was $60. So yep, $60. That's more my speed. And it works great. So it has a top pouch, which people normally would put their SLR into. And you can just put the radio in the top there. And then you can run a cable down into the main cavity where you can have your battery and all that stuff. So, all you need to do really is open the top, flip it on, attach an antenna, and you're ready to go. You can even use it while it's in the pack, which is really cool, I think. So anyway, so there's my radio. It's got a little tripod. Here's your logbook. What else is in here? Oh, a sit pad is always nice. One of those little inflatable sit pads. So you have something to sit on if there's nothing but pointy rocks. That's really nice. And it shrinks down about that big. I'll get into the rest of these in a little bit here, my Garmin and stuff. This was my very first activation on Mount Herman. And as you can see, so the activation zone was actually up above a little bit, but or I should say the peak was up above. This nice little ledge with that incredible view was still within the activation zone. And I was the only one down there. It was great. I had an incredible view and it was a beautiful day. It was July 3rd, just super nice. At that point, and I still use this little off-center fed dipole and a SOTA Beams push-up pole. So that's a 6-meter push-up pole. I didn't bring it with me today, but it's about that big when it's collapsed. Weighs, I want to say 2 pounds. So it weighs almost nothing, goes up in about 30 seconds flat. And then you just zip tie the matching transformer to the top of the pole and off you go. And so it doesn't take very long. The downside of the dipole is that being off center fed, it's long, because I wanted to be able to work 40 meters down, right? So the one side of it's 44 feet long, the other side of it's 22 feet long, which in this case was fine because I had plenty of real estate to run it out. But a couple of years later, when we were doing Mount Evans, and there were a ton of tourists up there, I did not have enough room to run those wires without killing somebody by tripping over it, So that's good if you have lots of room. But there are other options, obviously, you can do too. Like just an end-fed half wave is better because you only have one side that you have to worry about. And then up there, you can't really see it too much because of my zoom window, but that's my Moxon that I built. I literally used a piece of a Home Depot yardstick and some aluminum tubing I got from Home Depot, and I just measured it and bent it according to the calculations, and it works great. All right, let's get to POTA. So as I mentioned, POTA is very similar to SOTA in a lot of ways, and not just the OTA part. First you find a park, and there's the Parks on the Air directory. It's just parksontheair.com. Parks on the Air started here in the US, by the way, not in the UK. And it has grown worldwide as well. So these are all just rapidly growing programs. You put in your scheduled activation here on the, they have another website, POTA.app, and you just enter which part you're going to be at and mode and frequencies and so on. And then nice thing about parks, and the thing about Parks on the Air is it's not just parks. It's also, they expanded the program to include what they call entities. And an entity is kind of a very vague term. It could be a national forest. It could be a wildlife area, like Rocky Flats is an entity. So is the Rocky Mountain Arsenal, for example. All sorts of, so state parks. The only thing you won't find in there typically are city parks. But any of the national parks and like Colorado state parks are all included. So Chatfield is one of my favorite places to go because I live 10 minutes away. So I can just jump in the car or on the bike and go do an activation if I want to. But anyway, there's over 10,000 of those in the US alone. So lots and lots of places where you can do POTA activations. As far as QSO is very, very similar to SOTA. You set up and then you just, you can spot yourself. And of course, a lot of the parks have internet access. So that's a lot easier to do. Yes, sir. Well, I just pulled this right off of their website. So yeah, that would be kind of interesting. Rivers and well, trails, that could be maybe like the Colorado Trail might count. That's a good point. Yeah, National Scenic Trails or yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. So what he said was a lot of those you can do the trail, like the historic trail, which is inside of another park and might even be inside of a national forest or something. So that's how you could do a triple. Rivers, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. Well, obviously it'd have to be in the database, but I'm not sure how you would activate a river. I guess you'd have to be on the shore. Maybe you're in a boat. I don't know. That's a good question. But yeah, I'll have to check that out. I don't know. Yeah, hip waders. Yeah, that's not a fly rod. That's actually an antenna. Anyway, yeah, good question. Yeah, yeah. Well, now that you think about it, if you're at Chatfield on a fishing boat with an HT, you could do a POTA activation. You're right in the middle of Denver, so why not, right? But that's a lake, not a river. But yeah, you could do the same thing for a river. But that's a good point. I'll have to look up and search the database and see what they actually mean by rivers. Good question. So there's the US POTA map. And as you can see, it's kind of ironically, Colorado kind of has some of the fewest number of POTAs that compared to some of these other states. Look at Florida, man. You can barely see the state and the Northeast too. Tons of them. But there's also plenty of them. They even have, parks in Alaska and Hawaii and Puerto Rico and, all over the place. So pretty much anywhere you go, you'll probably be able to find a park, except for maybe Antarctica. I bet you there's one there. I don't know. All right, logging, again, very similar to SOTA, call sign, signal report, and your park or entity reference number. And then that's about it. And the other nice thing is if you're giving them their park reference number and they're a serious chaser, if they have a Yagi or whatever, they can point their antenna toward you and get a better signal. And then logging, as I mentioned, is just done through their website, very straightforward. You can also upload ADA files and so on. Now, nice thing about POTA is typically you can carry a lot more weight because you're not hiking to the top of the mountain. You can drive to the parking lot, walk 50 feet to a picnic table, which is what I did at Chatfield, and set up. And it's great. So you can bring heavier, more powerful rigs. You can bring bigger batteries and so on. So the Yaesu F2891 is a good one. The ICOM IC7100. These are nice rigs too, because a lot of these are, shack in the box rigs. So you can do 2 meters as well as HF and so on with them. This is one I've had on my wish list for a while, the IC706 Mark II-G, which is another shack in the box. And those are nice because they are relatively inexpensive. They're out of production, I believe. And so you can get them for like $400 or $500. And for a 100-watt mobile unit, it's pretty amazing. But are you shaking your head because they're not good or? Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the most in-demand rigs there are. Yeah. Yeah. My other favorite one is this one down here, the IC7000, which is another just awesome rig. But those are very hard to find, and they're usually $800, $900. So you might as well just buy a new rig at that point. Okay. Now, as far as my POTA kit, I pretty much just grab my SOTA bag and then with some extras. Now, as I mentioned, I recently upgraded to the I'm thinking of, it's a magnetic loop, Alex loop, ham pack as it's called. And I've got it here today. I'm going to show it to you. I did have a chameleon magnetic loop, which I sold at the last ham fest, just because it was too bulky and too heavy. But the Alex loop is half the weight and it goes up so fast. So I haven't taken it on an activation yet, but I will. I took the chameleon on one activation and it performed great. It was just a pain in the rear to get it up to the top of the mountain because it was too heavy. But anyway, so a mag loop is great though, because, they're quick and easy to put up. They don't have a whole lot of wind resistance, and they're also directional. So if you're in a site with a lot of RFI or in a site where other hams are operating, a lot of times you can just turn it and you can null out interference with it. And then I also like to use, I have a solar panel. This is just a little, I guess that's a 10 panel, 50 watt solar panel, and you can just set it up anywhere. It folds up to a pack about that big and puts out a full 50 watts. And then behind it there is, that's an Anker, Anker, solar generator, as they call it. Basically, it's a 100 amp hour lithium ion battery, and it's got all the connections inside. It's got an inverter. So it'll do, I think, up to 300 watts AC, 110 volts. It'll put out 12 volts. It'll put out USB 5 volts. And you can also connect it directly to a solar panel, and it's got the charge controller built into it too. So it's a nifty little unit, and it weighs, 5-6 pounds something. It's got a nice carrying handle. So that's something you can easily take out to a SOTA activation. And that combined with, a QRP rig and a solar panel, you could run for days, weeks, probably, if you have good sunshine. So, and it's great for field day too. I usually use it for field day. All right, just quick, here's some of my activations that I've done. This one in particular here, Rogers Peak, whoops, hit the wrong button. Rogers Peak was fun. So that's Jerry Kaiser ES and Walt W0CP. And those are two of my buddies. Again, they're both in their 80s. And Jerry was my CW Academy instructor, and he's one that originally got me into SOTA. And Walt is kind of a legend around here. He's a multiple mountain goat. He was the founder of Listen Up, if you guys know what that is. And anyway, they were up there, and the wind was blowing so hard. It was 50 miles an hour or more. First of all, it was a very strenuous hike to get up there. No trail or anything. You just sort of have to find your way up there. And then he broke out this handmade yagi, which is made from a bamboo, I believe, fishing pole, and then little pieces of wire that is stuck in there. And the wind kept blowing the little elements out of it. So you have to put them back in there. And so he's managing the antenna while Jerry's working the radio. And they did get a bunch of QSOs, but that was what kind of encouraged me to build a Moxon, because the Moxon is a much simpler, much more kind of wind resistant antenna. But that was a nice one. That was a double. We did two in one day, so we got 20 points that day. It was great. And this other one was one of my favorite hikes last year. It was Horseshoe Mountain, which is up by Fairplay. It's like 10 miles west of Fairplay, and it sits right on the Mosquito Range between Leadville and Park County. And so from up there, first of all, it was an incredible VHF site. I was catching people on Leadville just on my FT5 just with a rubber ducky, and so I had like 10 QSOs and nothing flat just with my walkie-talkie. And the other nice thing about it, because have anybody been up there on Horseshoe before? It's a 13. Have you been up there or no? No. Yeah, it's like 13,900. Does it say on there? No. It was just short of a 14er. If it is a 10-pointer, you can drive almost all the way up there if you have a decent four-wheel drive vehicle. And then the hike itself is only about a mile up to the top. And the top of this thing, being the name Horseshoe, runs for, I don't know, a quarter mile. The top of it is literally a big horseshoe that's a quarter mile. It was formed by iceberg, a glacier that carved it out. And so you could have 100 hams up there operating, and there's so much room up there. It was awesome. There's even a little cabin up there, like an abandoned cabin that you could hide out in if the weather wasn't so good. So that was a really fun one. Anyway. All right, let's see what's next. That's about it. So just some resources. I'll share the deck with everybody. So it's got all the websites and stuff on there that you might need. Everything from the various databases and so on. So yeah, any questions? Yes, sir. Great question. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so the question was just to open it up to the group, what everybody's preferred battery is, in terms of reduced chance of fires, explosions, and lightweight and so on. I'm going to turn the lights on and we can talk about it. What I've got here is this is Mark's BioNO. What did you say this was? A 3 amp hour. Yeah, so this is a BioNO 3 amp hour. This is similar to the one I have. I have a 5 amp hour, and this thing weighs maybe a pound, but and you can operate for hours on this thing at QRP levels. So yeah, let me kill my slideshow here, and then we can do a little show and tell for everybody. So hold on a minute. That's cool. So the comment was the some of the new RC batteries that are lithium ferrous oxide, right? Are very lightweight, and they don't have the fire explosion danger that some of the like the Life Pose do, and they run forever on QRP. So yeah, I'll check that out for sure. Okay, well, let me grab my kit here. Yeah, go ahead, Rob. Yeah, so the question slash comment was, it's hard to tell sometimes for any given peak just how difficult it is. And the only way that I found is, well, there's a couple of websites. There's there's trails.org or one of those that has a lot of people that have hiked the same mountains, so you can find trip reports from those people. Also, the SOTA sites a lot of times will have trip reports from folks. Like some of them will have 6 or 7, and they talk about how difficult it was or not difficult, and because a lot of peaks too have multiple different approaches, and so that's good to know. And also sometimes the parking areas are really hard to find, or not evident. So yeah, but there isn't just one place, unfortunately. Yes, sir. Yeah, based on how hard you're wheezing or not. Well, I'll tell you what, one reason, speaking of that, this is one of my things that I have in my pack. Oxygen. This is a really little one, but I had the bigger version of this when we did Evans, and that was the one we did last year, and we did two in one day. The first one was the strenuous one. We got to the second one, and one of my hiking buddies, when we got 3/4 to the top, got altitude sickness. I mean, like throwing up, really a terrible pallor of his skin and all that. And fortunately, we'd already gotten our QSOs by then. So it wouldn't be like a fisherman joke, you know, or like, yeah, well, good news is we got our QSOs. Bad news is we lost Jerry, but no. But the point is that little portable oxygen, and this weighs nothing, by the way, even the big one weighs nothing, saved it, because as soon as he started taking it, his color improved, and it really got him to the point where we could get him down to lower altitude, and then he was fine. But this and first aid kits are so key, because you just never know what's going to happen up there. Excuse me. Yeah, up on Mount Evans, everybody. Yeah. Yeah, good point. And that's a really good point too, just in general. I have yet to do a solo hike. It's not like you could get into too much trouble doing Green Mountain or something, you know, but you would really need some people with you just in case something does happen. And yeah, so this is my I think it's a 5 amp hour LifePo 4. This thing weighs, again, about a pound, and I can run all day on this thing without any external power. And again, the benefit of running an external battery is that with my rig anyway, the 705, you can use it to run 10 watts instead of 5. And it's great. Let's see, what else have I got in here? Oh, yeah, and then what I do, so I just have this little jumper that plugs into the battery, and then I've got power poles on this end. And then plugging into that, let me grab my radio out here. All right, this is my 705. Take the shield off here. So as you can see, this looks a little buffer than your usual 705, and it's because, as I mentioned last year, it took a little tumble off of a rock, and I decided, even though it didn't really hurt anything, it scared the crap out of me. And so let me turn this. Okay, and so this is called the POV cage. You can get those at HRO, or you can also get them directly from the manufacturer. They're made here in the U.S. in Nevada. And this is all aircraft grade aluminum. It's tough as nails. It doesn't weigh that much. And this is great because not only does it have a nice carrying handle on the bottom, it also has a stand. So now you don't need to carry a tripod and all that because it's kind of all self-contained. So there's that. So what I can do, yeah, sure, you can pass it along if you want. That's a little heavier than I would like it to be, but I kind of like the protection, so I deal with it. I also have the cable, power cable for the 705. And what's cool about this pack is I can plug, you know, the one end into the battery and then sneak it up through the backpack up into the cavity on top here. And I can just leave my radio in the pack and power it. And all you gotta do is plug in the antenna and I'm ready to roll. So that's kind of cool. Let's see, the other thing that I really like is this is the Garmin InReach. You guys ever seen these? This is a satellite capable GPS receiver and transmitter. And this thing will run, I just lent it to my daughter, well, sometimes my doctor, because she and a friend went down to Grand Canyon hiking over spring break. And there's no coverage in a lot of those areas. And so basically you turn this thing on, it will go, I think 5 days, 24/7 turned on. So it has incredible battery life. It uses the Iridium constellation, so it works virtually anywhere on the planet that has a view of the sky. And what it will do is every 10 minutes, it will ping the satellite your location. And then you can have people see on a map where you're at, like if your loved ones are concerned, you know, if you're alive or not. It will show that you're moving and where you are within like 30 feet or whatever. You can also send and receive text messages with this thing. So every once in a while you can just, and you can use an app too to communicate with it. So you don't have to use the tiny little keyboard on here. And so you can send a text to your wife or significant other or whoever saying, yep, I'm alive, we're doing great. And they can text back if they have a question or whatever. So great little unit. The only downside to it, well, first of all, it's expensive. They're about $400. Although I suspect they might be getting cheaper because the iPhone 14 has this capability in it now. So that might be driving the prices down a little bit. The other downside is you have to pay for a subscription, which you can do. The one I have is a month to month, so I can just turn it on and off anytime I want. So during the winter, I just leave it off. And then in the summer, for the plan I use, which gives you unlimited pings and whatnot, it's $35 a month. So, compare that against dying. That's probably, yeah, and you can spot with it too. Yeah, because you can send SMSs with this. Right. Good point. So, all right. Cool. No, that's great. Yeah, so you can do it for parks in the air too. I'll pass this around. Oh, you notice I have an Apple AirTag on here. And what was kind of cool about that, yeah, one is that, if this is easy to lose because it's tiny. But the other thing that was cool is my daughter let the battery run out on it, but I was still able to track her through the AirTag because she had internet service. Anyway, a little bit of a privacy concern there, but it's kind of cool. You can pass that along. Let's see, what else have I got in here? I brought, here's my little, this is my little sit pad. As you can tell, it's tiny, it's inflatable, and it inflates out to about a 12-inch square. And it's just really nice to have something to sit on. I won't pass this around because not that exciting. Now, one thing I really like about the ICOM is it has Bluetooth and Wi-Fi in it. This is the ICOM Bluetooth headset adapter. So you just clip this thing on, and then you can put any headset you want in here. So I use like earbuds, which give you really good noise isolation. And then it's got the microphone built right in, and it's got a push to talk button. So you literally just pick whatever headset you want, plug it in there, clip it on, turn it on, and then you just push this button to transmit. And it's great. It'll work, 30, 40 feet away, whatever the range of Bluetooth is where you're at. Icon makes it, and it's not that expensive either. I want to say it's $50, something like that. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, and I pair it with a pair of Bose earbuds that have the seal, so that if it's really windy, you can still hear pretty well. So that's kind of a nice thing. Let's see, what else? Oh, very important. Toilet paper. Toilet paper and a plastic bag to bring it all out with you. So yeah, this is neat. These are just little portable Charmin to go rolls, and it takes up almost no room. Better than using a leaf or something. Okay, first aid kit. Now I'm a former EMT for 5 years, so I'm a big believer in first aid and all that kind of thing. Also, there's a podcast called Out Alive that Backpacker makes. If you guys haven't listened to that, it will put the fear of God into you as far as what you need to take on a hike and survive, because these are all stories of people that have gotten lost out in the wilderness and survived one way or another. And it'll scare the crap out of you. Out Alive. And it's by Backpacker magazine. Yeah, it's produced here in Boulder. So it's pretty cool. Anyway, yeah, so I have a little minimalist first aid kit. It's got all the usual stuff in it, bandages and, ibuprofen and whatever. But, if you fall and hurt yourself, and I do have some pretty significant bandages in here too. So like if you were to cut your leg open or something, you could hopefully get off the mountain alive with it. Oh, here's my logbook. This is one of those, the stickers were extra. This is that paper. I'll pass this around. It's waterproof. So yeah, Right in the Rain is called, I think it's RITE maybe. I think they do. I got this off of Amazon, but yeah, they're not that expensive. It was $5-6, something like that. And yeah, you can write in the rain. You can use pencils. You can use, obviously, if you're going to use ink, you want to use ink that's not going to run in the rain. I like the Fisher Space Pens because they work underwater. They work upside down. They're pretty indestructible. So I'll pass this one around. Well, I don't know. I'm not sure how well that would work. It's kind of smooth, so I don't know how that would work. But yeah, speaking of pens, yeah, so I have this is just a little Fisher space pen, and it's got a pressurized cartridge in it, and the ink doesn't run and so on. So that pairs well with that. I also bring a couple of pencils just in case. Another invaluable thing that you want to bring, I have this nifty pouch, and in here I have a roll-up J-pole, 2-meter J-pole, which is great for getting better signals if you don't want to carry a Mox on or whatever. But also zip ties. Bring lots and lots of zip ties because you just never know what you're going to need to use a zip tie for. You might have part of your tripod break or your push-up pole, or maybe your hiking poles break or whatever. Zip ties, that and duct tape, of course, can solve all kinds of problems. Now, as far as antennas, I'll pass this one around. This is my dipole, off-center fed dipole. This will work 40 meters all the way down to 6. It does require a tuner for some of the bands. So if I deploy this, I either work 20 meters because it's resonant on 20, which is what I usually run anyway, or I bring my little tuner with me. So I'll pass this, but you can see how light this thing is. That includes the onion and everything in there. Pretty amazing little, and that was, I bought that one off of a guy on eBay, $60 or something. Now I make my own antennas too, but that one is great because it's weatherproof too. All right, let me see what else. Oh, I also have this nifty little thing. This came with the backpack. This is a rain cover for my backpack. So this thing will stretch all the way around the backpack, and unless you're in a huge torrential rainstorm, will keep your gear dry. And again, it takes almost no room at all. All right, now for the piece de resistance, let me show you my antenna. So this is the new mag loop. By the way, I also have a variety of end fed, half waves, you name it, lots and lots of different wire antennas, most of them handmade, which I'll take sometimes as well. Now the Alex loop, as I mentioned, is a magnetic loop. There's the little part of the loop. Oh, I got to put the other part on first. Yeah, these posts are just PVC, so they weigh nothing. Here's the tuning part of it. So there's a variable capacitor in there. There's a dial for tuning. And you'll notice on the upper part here, there's a little LED that shows when you're tuned. This little guy here was a $50 gadget that I had to buy for the Chameleon, and it's built into the Alex loops. So even though the Alex loops are a little more expensive, none of them are cheap. This one's got everything. And this is very light because it's all plastic. So this just slides right on top of the tripod. Yeah. Good question. Yeah. So Jed asked, so on my dipole, I've got a power pole connection on the end. That's so that I can lengthen it or shorten it. Yeah, kind of linked. Yeah, exactly. It's like a linked dipole. I keep it at the 40-meter length, but I have another length I can put on to make it 80 if I wanted to. Yeah, good question. Okay, so here's the tuning unit. And then there's two little parts here that go on. And by the way, one nice thing about magnetic loops is they don't have to be very far off the ground. Like 1 meter off the ground is all you need. So this is actually too tall already. I guess it's down all the way. Obviously, I could shorten the legs and whatnot. But anyway, so there's the connection to the radio. Now all I got to do is put the big loop on and I'm done. So this is the resonating loop. And it's literally just a piece of LM400 that's shorted on either end. So the question was, how do I like the loop as opposed to the end feds and so on? The thing I like about the loop is it's very quick to put up, much faster than the end feds because you don't have to, do a push-up pull and unfurl. And the biggest problem with those wire antennas like that one is those wires get tangled all the time. And so, yeah. Anyway, so and the other thing, let me just finish putting this together real quick. Oh, hatchet things. It does have a notch at the top. It doesn't always connect. So my legs, Velcro it on. I've only used this thing a couple of times. So that's quite dialed it in. Need to shape it. You're ready to go. Obviously, the more you do this, the faster it goes. This will cover 40, and it's actually marked here on the dial 40, all the way down to, I think it does 6 too. Yeah. No, 10. Yeah, 40 to 10. And so then you just basically obviously normally I do a little bit better job of that, but now it's ready to connect to the radio. And then as far as tuning it, all you do is you just key up, or send a CW tone. And then you can tell that it's marked by band. So you get in an approximate area, and then you just watch this light, and that light will come on when you're tuned. And then if you want to further tune it, you can look at your rig's SWR meter. Like the 705's got a really great graphical SWR meter. And so you can tweak it and you get it even really close. But most of the times you can get it down to very close to a 1-to-1 match on all the bands. The other thing about magnetic loops is that the lower frequencies tend to have a lot higher Z, which means that the bandwidth is a lot narrower. So you do a lot more tuning on the lower bands than you do on the upper bands. So for QRP, and especially doing SOTA, it's great because, I'm normally working the upper bands anyway, 20 meters, 15, 10, 12, whatever. And so once you get up there, then it requires a lot less tweaking when you change frequencies. And one benefit, of course, of running digital is that you're not changing frequencies. You just set it once and off you go. And the other thing with SOTA and POTA, once you get established, you're not QSYing very much anyway. You're not changing frequencies because you get pileups going and you don't need to change frequencies. You get everything you need in one spot. Right. But yeah, so the advantage of this, obviously, very fast to put up. As I mentioned, they're directional. So these loops radiate parallel to the loop. So if I've got a transmitter sitting right there, all I got to do is just orient it so that it's 90 degrees off or whatever, and you can null out a lot of that interference. That's how I got France on Mestahay. There's all those repeaters up there, and I literally just pointed it away from the repeaters, and no problem. So I think that's mostly it. Anybody else want to go through yours, Mark?
I focus more on POTA because POTA matches my stamina a little better. I use the KX3 for CW, and the battery that I passed around and I'll either use a dipole. These are two 17-foot pieces of hookup wire with a adapter, a BNC adapter in the middle to hit here, connect here, and the KX3 has a tuner built in. So one 17-inch wire just goes along the ground, the other goes up, elevated however you can. Sometimes there's natural structure there, like a tree that you can grab to. But I take a 17-foot fishing pole, crappie fiberglass fishing pole, and to mount it to a picnic table or a bench, I take a monitor stand from an LCD monitor, and you just take the bottom 12-inch section, and the outside diameter of the crappie pole is just about perfect to fit in these a monitor stand, which has a big clamp on the bottom. So that makes it quick and easy. The monitor stand is heavy. I don't want to hike with that. Everything else is pretty light. And that's my, I POTA'd, I'm a part-time POTA, not a serious POTAR. So I've been POTAing a couple of summers, and I'm waiting for the next, if summer gets here. This is my new toy. This is an FT8 transceiver from QRP Labs, which I passed around here, and it's the QDX, meaning the digital. And this is the whole thing is 5 watts. It's all class D, so it's digital only. You can't do any other modes. And it's about $100 with the
Mark Ehr, can you adjust the camera on Mark so we can see his stuff?
Thank you, John. Didn't think about that. 5 watts. So I'm anxious, and I've been, because of where we were in the sunspot cycle, I've been working on 20 previous summers, and this summer I'm going to focus on 10. This does 20, 15, and 10. You can buy the coils for whatever bands you want. You know, they're all the same price. You just wind it different. Larry? It has, Larry asked if it has a USB connection on the back. Well, for FT8, you need a computer to run the FT8 application. This is just the transceiver. So this and an iPad or a Surface Pro or something along those lines, like a brand new Dell laptop that you trade for a Raspberry Pi at a ham fest because you're extremely lucky. Oh, is that right? Really? Oh, fabulous.
SOTA POTA laptop. Yeah, thanks. This was the original SOTA POTA laptop that I bought. It was $200 and it weighs 2 pounds. Runs on Windows 10. Actually, I think it's Windows 11 on it now. And yeah, this works great, especially with the 705 because I can do Wi-Fi. So I can connect this to the 705 over Wi-Fi, even on top of a mountain, and do FT8 with no wires. Any trouble seeing the screen from the mountain? Yeah, sometimes, you know, sort of use your hand. Yeah, that's part of the reason why I actually have never run digital on a mountaintop, but I want to. Yeah, no, I might have one in there. I'll have to check. I'll get back to you on that. You know, yes, sir. Yeah, right. Yeah, radio's gaining a pound for every, 500,000 feet of altitude for sure. Well, especially when you take into account the fact that you got to haul water and food, and yeah, those packs can top 20 pounds easy, by the time you put a lot of stuff in them, which is the other reason why I don't carry a laptop usually. You want to do yours?
So I've been licensed 2 years this past week, and got my general in the end of 2021 there, and I've got the ASU 817. I also go up with the 857 sometimes if I want to run 100 watts. And my QRZ picture is me on top of Mount Snicktow over 13,000 feet. In September, I went up there with my wife and made a bunch of contacts with a big vertical. And I've been using an MFJ 1979 whip and a tent stake with a trucker window mount clamped to the stake into the ground, and I can work 10 meters through 20 meters just by adjusting the tune on it. And I got a little rig expert stick to match the SWR. So I haven't had to use a tuner in a while because the sunspot's doing so good. And last month we hiked out to Janet's cabin at by Copper Mountain. It's about 5 miles out. We stayed at the cabin for 2 nights, and I brought my off-center fed dipole just like that. And I brought the whip too, and made a bunch of contacts for White River National Forest, which is parks in the air. So I'm only 10 pints, 10 and snowshoes last month. Yeah, and it was snowing. It was dumping snow. So 2,000 feet of gain, and so doing a lot of hiking and backpacking, and I got the inReach for the backpacking a lot, and trying to learn some CW so I can do a lighter weight kit this summer and bring it backpacking because it's too much to bring backpacking. It's too heavy. But yeah, and I also do VHF on top of mountains. I usually have my Anytone handset there and Aero Yagi, and I also have a little pack tenna kit that hangs on top of a inverted trekking pole, so I can just carry a trekking pole and hang this little pack tenna on it, and it does it's a 2-meter antenna, so you can either put it in polarization for vertical or polarization for horizontal. And we did a VHF contest weekend, and I got some upper sideband on 2-meter contacts, which is great for the all mode all band radios. And a good mountain for that is Genesee Mountain, because you can park about a quarter mile away from the top of the mountain and hike up the little bike path to the top, and you can get into Denver really easy with a handy talkie. And we worked Pikes Peak to Cheyenne, Wyoming from up there. So yeah, and I made a contact to Slovenia from there on 20 meters. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I've had a lot of contacts with Slovenia lately, and there must be some high-powered stations up there or something. Let me see if I can just turn this thing. Yeah, there we go. Cool. Oh yeah, I forgot one. Oh, go ahead. Well, yeah, it normally doesn't actually, because this is LM400. You can bend it. So, but no, I've not really noticed. It doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to be a loop for it to really to work. So yeah, I haven't noticed too much of a performance impact. I definitely got to fix this bracket though. It's kind of jinky. But anyway, but yeah, you can just form it into whatever pretty picture you want, and but yeah, it does work great. The other limitation of these is they only run about 20 watts. I should mention. It's plenty for QRP, right? The other thing I forgot to mention is my favorite radio, the FT5D, and this thing is not only is it a great radio just for regular FM or whatever, and it's very sensitive and all that, but it also has a really killer capability, and that is when you get out on an activation, especially if it's a busy weekend, people will start to QSY to different frequencies. So you've got the calling frequency, which is where most people normally use, but there's also the North American Adventure frequency, which is just a few kilohertz off. They're all in that kind of simplex band. But what the 5D will do is it has a band scope. So you can actually either look at the overall band and see where people are transmitting if you want to talk to somebody that's on another peak. And you can also set up, I forget the name of the feature, but it has 3 bar charts. You can set up to 3 frequencies that you want to keep an eye on. And when somebody comes up on one of those, the bar chart goes up. And so it's great for monitoring multiple frequencies on simplex. So that's the other reason I really like it. Anyway. All right. Well, I think I'm out of topics. Somebody else have any questions? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Oh, I do have. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, good point. Yeah, Craig pointed out when we had coffee last week, we were talking a little bit about SOTA and stuff. And one thing that when you go outside of the country, it's really cool to be able to do SOTA activations outside of the country. I really want to be able to do more just because it's cool and fun and whatever, but you do have to look into the regulations of the local equivalent of the FCC while you're out there. And what I found is there is an international regulatory agency. I think it's IAPU or something. I forget the IARU. Thanks, Rob. And they have a lot of reciprocal licensing agreements with the United States. And so in the case of Ireland, I didn't have to register with anybody. All I had to do is put a stroke EI on the end of my call sign, and I was good to go. And so there are a lot of countries that are that way. Other ones, you have to apply for a license. But again, they may have reciprocity. So it's just a matter of, you know, a formality to get it. I will mention that most countries, though, reciprocity requires an extra class license. So if you get a general or tech, then you can't operate. There are exceptions to that, but yeah, they generally require the top end license for whatever reason. I was going to show you one other thing, which is, I think, in this bag. I feel like a carpetbagger with all this stuff I'm hauling around. Yeah, here it is. Anybody ever seen these antennas? Yeah, the company that sponsors ham study, which is called Signal Stuff. Yeah, $20. This is a 2 meter or 2 meter 70 centimeter antenna. Has decent gain. Obviously, it's extended, so it has pretty decent range. But the other thing that's cool about it, you can literally tie it in a knot and leave it that way forever, and it always springs right back. So it's great for a SOTA pack because you can just cram it in wherever it'll go, and you don't have to worry about it. So yeah, there you go. Ah, okay. Oh yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So the comment was the newer versions of these, which I think this is a newer one, have a little bit different material. The older ones, when it got too cold, they would start to slink down and not work as well. But yeah, these are amazing. And hamstudy.org, by the way, was the site we were talking earlier about, a good site for people who are looking to upgrade their license. That website, I think, is one of the big reasons I passed my extra is it just drills the exams into you. So it's hamstudy.org. Yeah. And oh, it's wonderful. Plus, you know, a percentage of everything they sell goes toward that site. So it's a really cool situation there. But yeah, these are great performing antennas. Oh, and as an added bonus, the tip is glow in the dark. I'm not sure why that's a great feature, but it's kind of cool, I guess. Anyway, okay. Thanks, guys.